Kendall Scudder, new chairman of the Texas Democratic Party. Thank you so much and welcome to Ion Politics.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
So let's start with the big question. How do Democrats respond after the November losses? What's your prescription?
Look, it's a new day for the Texas Democratic Party, and we can either argue with people and tell them that they were wrong when they chose to stay home and not vote for us, or we can look in the mirror and make some adjustments and try to move forward and re-earn some trust of folks. And that's what I intend to do. So we're going to build a grassroots apparatus all across this state. There are 40 mid-sized cities in this state that have over 100,000 people in them, and we as Democrats have not been there and we've not been present. And so we're going to change that. So from Amarillo to Brownsville, from El Paso to Texarkana, we're going to be all across this state building a network and making sure that people understand that the Democratic Party is the party that's fighting for working folks.
So let me ask you about what you said before about people staying home. Why do you think that is? And does the fact that perhaps messaging was off?
I think that the reason that those folks stayed home is because they don't always see a Democratic Party that's throwing down and fighting for them. And even if you don't have the levers of power, you should get caught trying. A lot of times, Democrats try a little bit too hard to be middle of the road and try to be consensus builders. But the reality is, that's just not where the electorate is anymore. They want to see elected officials across this state that are throwing down and fighting for their families. Life is hard. People are having a hard time paying their rent. The insurance rates are through the roof. Interest rates are sky high. And so as a result, if we as a party are not throwing down and making our brand synonymous with economic justice, then they aren't going to see us as a party that's standing up and fighting for them.
So let me ask you a question about that because Democrats were in power. They had the White House and they had the Senate. And so on a national level, uh, people stayed home, as you said. And here in Texas, there were no gains made by Democrats in the state legislature. So when you talk about fighting, what do you mean specifically about that? What do you think the message going forward is?
To me, what the message is that every single day when a Democratic elected official gets out of bed, they're trying to think about how to make your life easier. Okay. I'm the kind of guy that worked at a Dairy Queen and waited tables to put himself through Sam Houston State. Okay. I'm not one of these Ivy League eggheads. Okay. I'm one of these people who have every single day is struggling just like everybody else. And we want to build a party that speaks to people like that. That means that we're fighting to make sure we're raising the minimum wage. That means that we're fighting to make costs of healthcare more affordable. That means that we're fighting to improve community public schools and to keep your streets safe. That's what we as a party stand for. And that's what I believe our message will be moving forward.
You know, the other thing that you mentioned is, and I heard it just the other night when I was in North Dallas, and there was a town hall meeting held by former Congressman Colin Allred and Dallas County Judge Clay Jenkins. And there was more than one question by people there listening. And it was, do we do progressive? You know, does the progressive wing of the party need to, take charge, or the more centrist, and you touched on it a little bit before. And so if I hear you correctly, do you think it has to be more progressive? And that centrist just doesn't work?
What I think is that we as a party have an obligation to make sure that our base knows that we are worth showing up for to vote for. And so sometimes that may mean that we take really progressive positions. And frankly, I think that a lot of working Texans would like some progressive visions about how to make their life better because
What's
they
an
don't see that
example
right
of
now.
that? Yeah, what would an example of that be?
Well, I would say if you look right now at the Trump administration with these tariffs, they've just passed one of the largest tax hikes that we have seen on working families in my lifetime. And so, what it would be for a progressive vision would be making sure we're rolling those tariffs back. It would be making sure that we're cutting taxes for working people. That is a progressive perspective. And making sure that your cost of healthcare is going down and the cost of your prescription drugs are dropping. And that we're going to do this by making sure that the wealthiest and the billionaires and the super well off are paying their fair share. That's a progressive viewpoint. I think that that brand progressive has been tarnished a little bit because we as a party haven't been helping people understand what that is. A progressive vision was the Great Society and the New Deal. We brought electricity to rural America through progressive ideas and policies. Those policies made people's lives better. So when Democrats get out of bed every morning, we're focused on how to make your life better. How do we make things easier for you in a world that's already just so hard to exist in?
How has it been tarnished, the term progressive, in your mind?
I think it's been tarnished because the extreme far right has done everything they can to drag these big ideas through the mud. I mean, I think this voucher situation is a perfect example. The American public school system was a progressive idea. And what Republicans are trying to do right now is dismantle our public schools brick by brick because they don't want your kid to have the opportunity to be an attorney, a nurse, a doctor, a high tradesman, a master plumber. They don't want your kids to get educated because they want to keep your wages low. They want to keep your kid on assembly lines and in manufacturing plants and on farms. And a progressive vision is to make sure that the greatest tool for upward economic mobility on the planet, the American public school system, stays intact. That's a progressive viewpoint. So to me, I think that progressive politics is great because it works for working folks.
And when you say manufacturing, what are you talking about as far as, because I know to your point before, the Trump administration says its focus is to bring back manufacturing to the United States. So is that part of the disagreement there that you're talking about?
No, of course we want to bring manufacturing back to the United States,
Okay.
right? And people should be able to have the opportunity to work and live their lives how they are. And when they go to those manufacturing plants to work, they should have good union jobs that are paying them salaries and benefits, and they have the opportunity to collectively bargain. That those are progressive views. We are constantly looking out for working people. And Republicans talk a big game, but I don't see them actually doing it. They campaigned on no taxes on tips. Where did that go? They campaigned on getting rid of taxes on Social Security. Where did that go? They're feeding you a bunch of lip service, but not actually delivering for you. And when Democrats get to work, when we're legislating, we're actually passing policies that work for people.
2026 is around the corner, as you know, and candidates are going to begin signing up in mid-November for the March 2026 primary. And so I would imagine one of your big jobs is recruiting candidates. So, we know that former Congressman Allred, who I mentioned before, he said at the same meeting, he announced to people when someone asked him, "Are you going to run again?" He said he's seriously considering a run against Senator Cornyn. And so, aside from him, how do Democrats win against Senator Cornyn, against Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, the Attorney General, the Texas Comptroller, because all of these statewide elected officials are up, as you know?
Well, let's be real clear. There's a whole primary process that's at play, and I don't know that we're running against John Cornyn next year. I would really hate to be John Cornyn right now. He is going to have a bloody, bruising primary with Ken Paxton, one of the most overwhelmingly unpopular elected officials in the state of Texas. And I think that we're going to come out of that situation in a really good spot. Whoever the Democratic nominee is will be able to run for the United States Senate against this Republican policies that are cratering the economy. I mean, look, just today, the stock market has now plummeted again for the second consecutive day. Republican economic policies are cratering the economy. Costs are going up. Life's getting more expensive. So whoever comes out of that primary, Democrats are in a great place. I will remind people that Colin Allred lost in 2024 by 8 points. And across the country right now, Democrats are overperforming expectations by 11. So if you don't think that Texas is in play, then you may not understand math. The reality is, Texas, whether it is Senate, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, we're going to be fighting for everything in every part of this state, and Republicans better get ready.
Haven't we heard this for the last decade that Texas is in play?
Yeah, you sure have. And Republicans have
And
been
and
terrified the entire time.
Well, but the results don't indicate that the state is in play.
I don't think that that's necessarily accurate. I think that we have had the trend line over the years has been Texas trending in our direction, but these things don't happen overnight, and it takes a lot of time to earn trust from people. It's also a new day in the Texas Democratic Party, where we now have a progressive millennial in charge that's building a grassroots apparatus all across this state. So I guess we'll see what happens next November. But I'm really excited about opportunities for us to have success, and I think people on the ground and the grassroots are as well.
And my last question to you, and I appreciate your time, is how does the Democratic Party build this infrastructure that you're talking about in these mid-sized cities that you had mentioned earlier?
Well, I think you start by showing up. What's been happening recently is, Democrats don't even step their foot in the door in these places, and then we act shocked whenever they don't vote for us. Well, if nobody's bringing our view and our perspective there, then of course they don't hear it and they don't understand it. And so we start by recruiting county chairs and precinct chairs all across this state. We're in a huge deficit in both of those columns, and it's our obligation to start building those. And then once they're built, we resource them to the best of our ability. Sometimes that's financial, sometimes it's just scrappy, good old fashioned training so that people can roll up their sleeves and get to work. You can't put a sack of flour in the oven and expect it to make biscuits. There's a lot of steps along the way. And if we are expecting to just walk in the door because we raised a bunch of money and win elections, then we're going to be upset whenever it comes election day. We have to make sure that we are putting in the work during election seasons and when it's not election seasons to build these long-term relationships across the state again. And like I said earlier, that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and we have no time to waste. And that's why we are hitting the ground running.
Kendall Scudder, new chairman of the Texas Democratic Party. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
I just so appreciate you having me. Thanks so much.